Ms. Marvel, Disney Villainous, and Crescent Moon. This is Staying In.
Gents, love the podcast. Although I feel there is a segment you started, but need to continue.
Oh, we're getting some critical feedback. I'm quite a fan of this. Let's go.
This is a message from Ben on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks,
Hi, Ben.
You can slide into our DMs anytime.
I don't think that means what you think it means. Yeah.
I think that's all right. But we got this message. So Ben says, Gents, love the podcast. Thanks very much. Although I feel there's a segment you started but need to continue now. We've not really been known for segments in the past, so...
We did a couple of weeks of Ask Dan.
Yeah.
Ask Dan was good. I also quite liked Lisa's funny stories.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
The segment last show where you all did the outro was really good. We got some good critical feedback about that. Maybe that's what they're talking about. So I'll read on further. Oh, okay. Really stringing this out. Perhaps my favourite ever staying in moment was when Peter started an in-depth relationship.
What?
It's always going to be in depth, whatever Pete does.
I know, yeah. I love the fact that Peter can't work out what this relationship was or how it involves him. Perhaps my favourite ever staying in pod moment was when Peter started up an in-depth relationship with the British Egg Council.
Oh,
yes.
My word.
Oh,
that was Sarah. Was it
Sarah. Yeah.
Of course, This was episode what, Kris?
It was episode 110 and 1111. It was a two-parter, Sam.
A two-parter saga, yeah.
I actually, ironically, listened to this the other day. It just came onto my Spotify. And Pete talking about his boilies.
Boilies. So,
okay.
So what Ben is asking for is for us to do a monthly consumer advocacy section led by Peter, in which Peter quizzes regulatory boards about how we should use products, and that would be incredible, says Ben. I want to hear him get to the bottom of important topics such as...
Go on.
Pre-grated parmesan.
Ooh.
Can you paint your own zebra crossing outside your house? Biscuits in summer. Let them melt or put them in the fridge. Keep up the good work, Ben. Well, thanks, Ben.
Ben, thank you. I think this is a good idea.
Okay. Well, first off, it's monthly, so we don't have to do it every show.
I was going to say that, yeah. So, or Ben doesn't realise there's like 50-odd podcasts that he hasn't seen.
Oh, I think Ben realises. I think Ben's just like, I'd like to see it come back, but not all the time, eh? Come on, let's not muck about.
Yeah.
Too much of a good thing.
Yeah. The one there that got me was zebra crossings and whether or not you could paint one outside of your own home or like ad hoc. Are there some sort of rules of the road that you can essentially...
Is there some kind of code or some kind of code for highways or something?
I quite like that as an idea. Like, are there what can we do around making our communities safe? I quite like that as an idea. I think we're onto something there. But what shall I go and investigate by harassing poor PR people?
I love the fact that you've turned this into Peter Willington investigates rather than just
rather than a discussion piece for a podcast.
So I think basically what I think this is a very good idea. Let's turn this into a saga. I would like listeners to email us stayinginpod@gmail.com
or DM us on Instagram.
Slide into our DMs, all that sort of stuff, and ask us to go and investigate something. Peter Investigates is going to be the name of the new section, and I will not rest until I have uncovered the nation's, and indeed the global population's, greatest questions. And I will talk. I don't get me wrong. I will talk to government agencies, such as the Egg Council, if needs be. I can go back to Sarah. If I need to talk to Highway Code about roadworks, I can do it. So there's a news story that's come out today that I thought was really interesting. So I made the mistake of going onto Twitter today, and I've seen that there's a new Marvel TV show. I think we mentioned it the other day, Ms. Marvel.
Ms. Marvel.
Yes, Ms. Marvel. Very much based on the Ms. Marvel of like the 2006, 2007, that sort of era.
2013.
2013. Was it really? Oh my goodness me.
Yeah. Kamala Khan, yeah.
Yeah, Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel. Now, I've read the first book, the first graphic novel collection of those, and I thought it was pretty good actually. I quite
really
liked
good.
it. I didn't go further with it, just because I wasn't particularly just looking for that kind of a story, as in the high school story kind of a thing. I just wasn't that bothered about it. But I did really like the art. I love the characters. I love the writing. I thought it was really well put together. This new TV series has come out, and it looks like maybe it's bombed. Like it's had the lowest ratings of any Marvel TV show that they've put out so far. As part of this extended thing. And I must admit, I don't know why. Like, because it feels like this should be a bit of a smash hit. I've not heard anything good or bad about it, other than people just aren't watching it in the same quantities, which obviously, you know, it's Marvel stuff, so I'm sure they're watching it in pretty high quantities, but not as much as even something like Falcon and the Captain America and the Falcon and that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Or as, you know, not as in as many numbers as certainly something like WandaVision. Has anybody, like you folks have seen some of it, I want to say, because you're usually pretty hot on this stuff.
First 3 episodes have already been out, and it is probably at the moment, is probably my favourite of the Marvel series. I mean,
really?
I think WandaVision might end up as my favourite because it might be more rewatchable than Miss Marvel turns out to be, and Miss Marvel's already hitting a few like odd stumbling blocks in terms of pacing, which eventually was a thing that kind of threw Moon Knight off kilter as well. But I think that Ms. Marvel does a incredible job of bringing the comic to life, and also an incredible job of bringing this character to life of Kamala Khan. And what was so great about the comics was how it really enveloped the character in her own culture and identity, but then also explored how that sort of faced up against the fact that she was this emerging like superhero. So she is a Pakistani Muslim, but first generation American. So she was born in America, but her parents fled Pakistan after the partition, or during the partition, should I say. And when I first read the comics, I always thought that was something that wouldn't really be handled very well, but actually the more you read it and the more you start to see that they actually really understand how that shapes or has an impact on her as a character. And what I love about the TV show actually is how they really celebrate that cultural identity, that cultural heritage, and that it's multifaceted. It's got depth there. You know, in the latest episode that has been on, there was a Muslim wedding, but during the Muslim wedding there was Bollywood dancing, and it was just lovely to see, you know, this cultural like exploration on the screen of not only like this deeply religious event, but then also this strong Pakistani heritage that this family have got. And I think it takes a lot to bring that into a story like this. Definitely, you know, like a Marvel TV series. So there's that, which I really enjoy about it. But then the other thing that I really enjoy is that it's pretty much stealing elements from some of my favourite movies over the past couple of years. Like, if you told me that Edgar Wright was directing the series, especially the first episode, I would have believed you without looking. Like, the editing is so sharp and it's so fast and it's so, like, if you're not careful, you're going to get whiplash, but it's incredible. It's kinetic. It's powerfully pacey. And then the elements of it where you're just like, you've taken that from Mitchell's versus the Machines. You've stolen that right out of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and somehow blended it seamlessly into this live action series. Like, it is incredibly clever and smart, and you really have to pay attention. And Kamala Khan is a really well-rounded character with clear aspirations and aims and dreams, and she lives in this cross-cultural, diverse landscape of people and friends and family, and it's so, it could go in either direction. It's either going to be incredibly superb, or it's really going to drop the ball when it really gets into the quote-unquote marvelness of it.
Yeah.
And I mean that by the company that are making it, not by the superhero that she kind of looks up to. I mean, I've not even mentioned like what the actual story is. If you're familiar with the comics, it diverges a little bit from her origin, but basically she's really looks up to Captain Marvel, idolizes her as, you know, the best Avenger in her eyes, or the best superhero. And one day she finds a bangle and ends up finding out that she's got some sort of superpowers, which I actually prefer to the comics where she goes to a beach and gets lost in a bit of fog, and then that unlocks her Targaryen mists, and she realizes that she's an Inhuman. But you could understand why Marvel may not want to reference the Inhumans, because they don't exist. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
Right, because that was one of the things, you know, you touched on some of the things that I liked about that first collection of comics, which was, you know, it really did feel like, you know, there's some really cool scenes where they're hanging out with, you know, some of their younger friends who have got jobs in like a bodega, for example, and there's tons of that. There's tons of stuff that you recognise from that kind of what's the best way of me saying this? Like when you go into it, so here in the UK we have like corner shops and that kind of stuff, and they often have quite a bit of the culture of the people who run them in them. Yeah. So for example, you might go in and it might be absolutely like filled with the smell of like incense, for example. There's one just down my road that smells like that, for example. Or, you know, that they've got like important images or important, you know, bits and pieces in this thing that allows them to kind of show off some of their culture and be close to their culture. So there's bits of that in the comics, but there's also the flip side of it of there. It's not just like a blanket like this culture is good. It's actually this culture is complex like every other culture, and there are really great parts about it, and then there are downsides to it. Of, for example, I know Kamala really struggles with some of her family members in terms of how strict some of them are. For example, I don't know if that happens in the TV series, but and that's a really interesting part of it too. And the thing that it reminded me of, that comic series, weirdly, when I was reading it, the thing that constantly went through my mind was the feeling I'm getting from this is the same feeling I got when I was 14 or 15 and reading Spider-Man, where it was about it was really about Peter Parker, a person who's struggling and has their own goals and ambitions and all that sort of stuff, and they're trying to figure out what it means to be a young person in New York, for example, and the different sort of cultural niches that they were part of, the jocks, the nerds, all that sort of stuff. And then there was also this other element, oh, and by the way, I am a superhero, and I have these powers, and I have got them through this, and also figuring out what that means, what their identity means there as well. And it feels to me that made me very excited about that comic series, and I hope that comes across in the TV series, because that to me was the sort of, it felt like a new Spider-Man for me.
It's interesting that you mentioned Spider-Man, because I mean I probably come to this in a bit of a different place to kind of you guys. So I've like, same with all the Marvel stuff, I don't read the comics, so I come to the films, I come to the shows kind of fresh, without having really any of that back kind of story and that backwards knowledge. So, but you mentioned Spider-Man. I found what was quite interesting was like when the MCU started with the Spider-Man films, they took into account the fact of fans have seen the Spider-Man origin story 100 times. No one wants to see that same thing again. So you don't have that. When he shows up in the MCU, he's practically fully formed. He is already fighting crime. He might not have the suit yet, but he's pretty much there. But what they do here with Kamala Khan, they get to do that origin story. They get to do the discovery of powers. How do I do this? How do I get the powers to work? And the training and the practicing and the learning and all that stuff. So it is interesting that you kind of make that comparison, because obviously the nature of the characters both being kind of young teenagers, and the kind of the role that being in high school plays in both stories is really prevalent, and it's a huge part of Miss Marvel. Like a lot of it is around her school life and existing with friends and social dilemmas and discovering who you are and being proud of who you are and all that stuff. And it's all really lovely. Like stuff with, as you talk about, stuff with her culture and religion and some of her friends and how they deal with kind of religion and how they deal with other people. And it's lots of it is very, very subtly done, very delicately done, but it's really nicely played that kind of everyone can watch and you can enjoy it. And as Sam said, like it's so refreshing to see some of these cultures being portrayed in such detail. Like I've only watched the first 2 episodes, and like in the second episode there is kind of a scene in a mosque, and you don't really see that. You never see stories in mainstream kind of media where you've got scenes in a mosque. There was stuff that I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Like genuinely, these are cultural things that I just didn't know. I've not been exposed to. So it is refreshing to see this stuff being portrayed in such a way that is very matter of fact, very like, this is just part of the story that we're telling. This is part of these characters' lives. So we'll include that in there. Sam, you said this is your favorite kind of series that they put out. It's not my favorite. Like I encouraged to kind of see more of it. Like I watched the first episode and kind of, as you said, that the editing and like some of the stylistic choices are just gorgeous. The use of kind of the idea of hand-drawn animation and different things, very much kind of scrapbook ideas and stuff like that. It did feel a little bit like a more of a kids show compared to the other ones. So I think maybe that's why it didn't hook me quite as well as some of the shows. Loki for me is my favorite of the shows that they brought out. I really did like Moon Knight, and those kind of stem towards perhaps a more adult storyline anyway, and kind of that the context of those is more grown up. Not to say that there's not grown up elements to Miss Marvel, absolutely not. There absolutely are, but the base level of it, because they're playing it as this schoolgirl in school, obviously the tone is going to be lighter. You're not going to go in with the dark tone that you are with Loki or Moon Knight. That just wouldn't work. So it's absolutely correct that what they've done. It just didn't hook me as much as it did. When I watched the second episode, however, I found myself just smiling all the way through and really enjoying, and the joy in all the characters. And like the character of Kamala Khan, played by Iman Vellani, is just so joyful. And there's a wonderful kind of dance sequence that she does in the second episode, which is just fantastic. And it's so childlike in the most perfect way. It's not childlike like an infant. It is like a teenager, kind of lost in thought, lost in kind of emotion. And it is absolutely. And I found myself really enjoying it. And like I watched that first episode, and I was kind of like, you know what? Yeah, it's fine. It's not really for me. Whereas the second episode, I was like, it's not for me, but you know what? I'm along for the ride. It's really good fun. It's not gonna finish on top kind of all the things that I like, but I'm really enjoying it. Like I've been, I think it's fair to say, somewhat subdued with the MCU output ever since Endgame. But I have to say, kind of consistently with these TV shows, maybe not Falcon and the Soldier, but like WandaVision and Loki and Moon Knight and all of these, they are just hitting it out of the park, and they're giving us interesting stories, interesting characters, giving us new things, like the culture that we're getting from Miss Marvel, some of the culture that we got from Moon Knight, and all the different ideas from Loki, and everything is just so kind of rich that I'm not getting from the films. But that's okay, because these are really doing it for me, and Miss Marvel has picked it up. And it's great that one thing that's always been kind of levied at a lot of the Marvel films is they're all the same. They follow the same track, and they do to an extent. Don't get me wrong, they are all different, and certain films stand out. Something like Black Panther absolutely stands out above others, but a lot of them, they follow a very typical path, and that's okay. It's a tried and trusted method. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But they've just had this freedom with these TV shows to kind of just like let loose and say, you know what, if it doesn't work, that's okay. Let's try something. Let's try and be fun. Let's try and do something interesting. Let's make a show that's dedicated to the character. The show of Miss Marvel is the character of Kamala Khan. The show of Loki was Loki. And that's the thing. It's true to the characters that it's about. And it's not just, okay, it's this character in a Marvel show, cut and paste, and off we go. It's very much different. And I am really, really enjoying it. I am interested to see how it progresses and how, because I'm still very early on what we all like, so there's only 3 episodes out at the moment at time of recording, but kind of it is going to be interesting to see what happens with the character and how they can maintain this kind of joy, because that's the best thing for me. I'm just sitting there with a big smile on my face, and it's a big kind of bowl of popcorn and sweets for me. That's it, and that's brilliant.
I just love Phase 4 in terms of what Marvel is doing at the moment, full stop. This revisionist approach to the superhero film narrative, as you say, Dan, that cookie cutter model that Marvel did for probably the first two and a half phases. They've now thankfully kind of drawing a line under that, and there's something really refreshing about having these alternative perspectives, or in this superhero rich world, it's told through the eyes of characters that aren't the typical white, male, to some degree heteronormative kinds of individuals, but also crucially in a manner that's not overly tokenistic, to actually have a full creative team that are also part of that culture. So Bisha K. Ali is the showrunner for this series, who herself is British Pakistani, who also was one of the writers of Loki, and also wrote for Sex Education, that TV series as well. So some really good pedigree there, but also just straight away with that laser precision knows what it is to embody that role across cultures, in the same way as in Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings you had that as well, to a degree also in Eternals as well. And there's something really, really refreshing about that, really. And so those little nuances, as you say, Dan, of being in a mosque, and can I just say, it's lovely to be in a mosque in a TV series without any sinister music playing in the background.
Absolutely, yeah.
This isn't an episode of Homeland.
Or 24 or something like that, where you kind of like, oh God, what's going to happen?
Little things like take your shoes off. I mean, most people know you take your shoes off before you go into a mosque, but the fact that one of the characters, her shoes get nicked, and it's just like, oh God. And, it's one of those little tiny minutiae of everyday things that go on.
It's the fact that they all speak Urdu to each other as well, which is really nice. And it's never, I think, the lens that this is shot through is from that Pakistani, it's that Muslim lens. It's not being shot or written from a Western lens where things need to be explained or spelled out in terms of, these little like dashes of Urdu that they speak to each other, just like really add to that feeling. And there's not really like a Western analog there who stands by and like explains what is it going on. There's like a wonderful scene in where they're having this gathering outside, and it like explains who these different groups are. And it's like, there's one time where they come up to these, explains to these guys, oh, here are the converts, or I should have said revert. It's never really explained what that really means, because it's seen through a very specific lens that already understands what that means. So it doesn't need to be explained to the audience. And that's where it really gripped me, in terms of actually seeing, as you were saying, Kris, a movie without a male Western lens to it, like a completely new and unique voice.
And it's not trying to say, oh, look, isn't this great? It is challenges. It highlights the sexism there, the institutional sexism in the mosque, and this kind of like back and forth between the intergeneration, the different generations as well. So, it's not trying to gloss over anything there at all. And you get that sense of reverence for this culture, but also, there's laughter in the mosque. There's kind of wisdom that's expounded there. And there's that sense of community. There's a wonderful thing towards the end of the second episode where you see an Eid celebration, which for a lot of people, they don't know what Eid is. And I think, as you say, Pete, one of the reasons why people didn't jump on this was, and I saw this in lots of comments when the trailer came up, they said, yeah, that looks cool, but it's a kid's show, so I won't watch it. And, let's be honest, all of this is kids. Yeah. These are 12, this is all a kids show, it's all a kids show. Like, if you think about it, Iron Man came out in 2008. Think about when, you're 12 years old. If you're born in 2008 when Iron Man came out, 12 years later, I think that hits around the same time as, I think, the first Doctor Strange, or it might be one of the Guardians of the Galaxy films. That, for you, is when that could be your first Marvel film that you see. And so, we've got to remember that fact. These are all kids' films. It just depends on, and like it hasn't been that long, but equally since we were kids. And I look at Kamala Khan, I think, how cool are you? You are wanting to. You don't only just love Captain Marvel. You wear T-shirts. You cosplay as Captain Marvel. When I was her age, I mean, I've always been geeky and nerdy. I wasn't that, extrovert. I didn't make it part of me. I'd hide it, say for example, because I didn't want to get punched. So I'm watching this character, and a bit like you, Dan, I've got this grin on my face because I've got a character here who is just so inspiring to some degree. And I kind of wish that, if I was a 12-year-old watching this now, or 16, which is the age of Kamala Khan, watching this, I find her so inspiring, genuinely. Yeah. And just her friendship and this culture she's a part of, equally so. I think it's a very, very special show. Yes, it'll probably fall into the trap of Marvel, as invariably happens towards the end, a la lots of the TV series. But that moment, that fizzing vibrancy, is something that I think transcends that. I judged a flower show the other day.
No, you didn't.
I just can't believe that that's true.
Did anyone ask you to, or?
Well, yeah, I did. Yeah, I was asked to.
Right. Okay.
What do you mean? Who asks? What room are you in?
Who headhunted you?
Yeah.
Who looks at Chris Darby and says, "You know what that man needs to do? He needs to judge this flower show."
I mean, maybe there's some kind of sadist, because as we've spoken about in a previous pod, I had quite crippling hay fever.
True. And is it all about the size of the stamen, or is it other things as well?
Right, okay. So, walked into a big tent. It was the WI, and this sweet old lady came up to me and said,
"The judge has died. We need someone else now."
Is there a doctor in the plane that can judge this
Have you just had a fever dream that you're in an episode of Midsummer Murders? Because
something's going wrong here. So Chris, you go to the Women's Institute.
Yeah, they had a tent, and I walked in. A sweet old lady came up to me and said, "Would you mind judging the flowers that we have here?
Okay.
Pick the best display."
Did they know
around
you?
The room. They didn't know me, no.
were you wearing your doctor's garb? Were you wearing your graduation finery?
Yeah. Were you wearing your T-shirt that says "Ask me to judge flower shows"?
No, I just gave off that vibe, that energy.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe it was just the way I was just looking around the room. Maybe it's the way I was blowing my nose because of the pollen. I could see the pollen. It was that thick in the air.
It's because he's wearing that shirt that says "bonkers for pollen." It wasn't even that funny. But now I'm imagining Kris like a big beak.
Can I ask one of you, and this is going to be committed to the edit, can I ask one of you to get me a T-shirt with that on it?
Oh, don't worry. Yeah. I'm already Googling whether or not this exists. Yeah.
It doesn't exist. But can we please make a T-shirt for Kris that says In a weird twist of fate, we all know that Pete is cursed, and whenever Pete tries to leave Bristol, there's terrible weather, there are strikes, something always happens to prevent him from leaving that area.
Yes.
So, to try and lift the curse, I went to go and visit Pete in Bristol 2 weeks on the trot.
Very magnanimous of you.
I know. And I think it may have worked. But we'll find out in July when we all get together. First time, we were on our way back from my brother's wedding. And we just stopped off, went to a lovely Asian supermarket. And I had a wonderful maple syrup brownie. No, maple syrup flapjack.
Indeed. And
a decaf coffee. And my son ate a whole pack of Fridge Raiders in Sainsbury's.
I'm surprised he's not absolutely built by this point. Do you know what I mean?
A whole pack of Fridge Raiders. He was very content the whole way.
He's on Huel now, is he?
Yeah. Every day he's making those shakes. And then the week after, I came down because it was the Bristol Craft Beer Festival.
Oh, yeah.
And Pete and I went for opening night. Opening night.
Eagle-eyed Instagram followers may have spied a before and after picture of the evening, where the after picture was distinctly more glassy-eyed than the former.
Can I just have the record show how good Sam looks in a hat?
Oh,
thanks.
Looks great in a hat. Looks great in a hat.
So I don't like wearing hats. I don't think I look good in a hat. However, I'm currently trying to be a positive role model for my son. And when he's out in the sunshine, it's like, very important, Hugo. You've got to wear a hat. It's very important. Keeps the sun off your head. And I can tell he's looking at me and going, yeah, but you're not wearing a hat.
Yeah.
So why should I wear a hat? So he has his own sunglasses now, and he has a hat, and I have my hat and my sunglasses. So I wanted to buy a hat that wasn't just like an American sports team that I have zero affinity with or understand, nor an American sports brand that I didn't have an affinity with. So I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to pick up a hat from a brewery company in Bristol, and I did.
There you have it. Yeah.
And it's a nice hat.
It's a nice hat, isn't it? We had a lovely time. We drank a couple of beers, one or two of them.
Just a couple. Yeah.
Just a few. It was very nice. I played
Shuffleboard.
Turns out I'm quite good at shuffleboard. I honestly didn't think I'd be good at. I didn't think I'd be good at what is essentially mini curling. And then afterwards, because of course this is where my brain goes. I was like, how much would it be to buy a shuffleboard?
Jeez.
Yeah, of course,
Of course.
of course it would. Yeah, of course it would. Anyway, I can't afford one, so the way I'm going to see it is undefeated. Basically, in 30 years' time, I'll say, I could have been a contender. So you came down and had a lovely time at the beer festival.
We had a few beers at the beer festival.
A few beers.
We got some blue popcorn, which was actually a lot nicer than
it was. Disgusting. I hated it, but that's mostly because I can't deal with toffee popcorn. I think it was basically blue toffee, wasn't it?
It was salted caramel blue popcorn.
Is that what it was? Oh, I don't know. I didn't like it.
I did 25,000 steps that day. If you've been to Bristol, we walked up the Christmas steps 3 times.
3 times. That's quite a lot. We also managed to play quite a lot of board games.
We did.
Listen, I want to be real for a second. I've been playing a board game. I've been playing a card game for a while with Alex, and it's a game that I was very snobbish about. Alex got bought for I think it was a birthday present. Got bought a copy of the core set of something called Disney Villainous, which is how to describe it? It's an asynchronous card game where there's tons of different mechanics, and basically there are a bunch of Disney villains, so you play as the Disney villains. So that's people like Cruella de Vil, people like what's his name? Thingy Pete. What's that Pete guy called? The one from
just
Steamboat
Pete.
Willie. Is it? He's called
Just
Mean
called
Pete.
Pete,
Is
yeah.
it called
It's
Pete?
just called
Okay.
Pete, yeah.
Just called Pete. See, we never get good names. There's also what's his name?
Prince
the
John.
King, Prince John. Yeah. So lots and lots and lots of Disney villains. You play as those, and you have a play area in front of you, in which you have to complete an objective, and each objective is unique to the villain that you're playing as. So, for example, you might have to collect a certain amount of energy coin things.
Well, I can give a great example. So, I played this game for the first time at Pete, and I was Ratigan. Oh, Ratigan.
Right.
From Basil the Great Mouse Detective. One of the finest Disney animations
One of the
ever
greatest
made.
Disney films.
Yeah,
One
without
of the
doubt.
greatest. It's in the title. And Ratigan can win, and you'll know this if you've seen the film. He wins by getting the robot version of Queen Elizabeth into Buckingham Palace.
Right.
So on these little player mats that you're all playing with, there are about 4 or 5 different locations, and when you occupy that a certain location on your turn, you get to do a certain amount of actions. And that might be like play a card, or collect some power coins, or do some sort of stuff. So Ratigan, to win, basically had to get the robot version of the Queen from his hideout to Buckingham Palace, and that was how he won. But everyone, and this is the thing that kind of astounded me about the game, is that I thought everyone would have a variation on that same theme. So it would be try and get X into Y position. But no, like the game is a lot more thematic and detailed in how it applies that theme than I had any sort of idea that it would be. That everyone has a very, very specific, like, for example, Kris, you were playing Prince John from Robin Hood, and yours just like get a certain amount of money because that's what he's obsessed with. Yeah, it was quite staggering in that way. I was very, very impressed by that.
And here's the thing, here's the confession. When Alex got purchased it, I thought to myself,
you do, don't you?
You look at it and you go, look, like I know Waterstones is all about putting board games into their shops now, all right? But this is and every once in a while there'll be, and I would say 50% of the set is usually pretty good, and then maybe a little bit more than 50% is pretty good, and then every once in a while you'll be like, yeah, okay, we know why this is here. And whenever I looked at Disney Villainous, because that would always be in there, I was always like, this is going to be a cash-in. It's got the Disney name on it. It's a board game. It's going to be tedious, or a skin of something, or something along those lines. And I'll be honest with you as well, I believe it's by Ravensburger, isn't it?
Yes.
And Ravensburger are a company that do really, some of the games that they do are really great, and some of them absolutely are cash-ins. And that is part of their business model. In the same way that Activision, part of their business model is make really incredible, compelling games, and part of them is take a very, very standard genre and skin it with the thing that the kids like, right? And I thought that that's what Disney Villainous would be. So when I sort of started delving through it, this thing is made. First of all, the component quality is off the chart.
And the art.
And so for example, you get a little a sort of like statuette, I guess, of your villain. And that represents where you are in your play space, because you essentially, one of the core mechanics in the game is that you sort of are represented on your own little personal board by the villain, and when you take an action, when you move the piece, you can take all of the actions that are displayed on the board in that location, but you can't, by default, do the same set of actions the next time on your next go.
Yeah.
Right? So that's generally how that bit works. And there's a bunch of different actions like discarding cards and drawing more of them, and generating resources and stuff like that. I won't go into the specifics of those things. But the statuette is gorgeous. It's like a little piece of modernist sculpture. It's fantastic. And you get exactly what the thing is. It's not like a perfect miniature. It's not like an exact representation of Pete. It's not an exact representation of Cruella de Vil. It's almost as if an artist has been commissioned to represent what they are, right?
Like an ideograph.
Sure.
It's like the equivalent of you running the word hello through Google Translate over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. So it's still got the essence of what hello is.
Yeah.
But eventually it starts losing a little bit of its shape and and like how it's like recognizable to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like
It's
someone took
totemic.
Ratigan and just
exactly.
kept on going through it.
And then the card art, as you say, Kris, like the card art. So all of the images, they're not just like, oh, let's just go and get the cells, copy them off, jobs are good. They've created individual card art that is, so for example, Steamboat Willie, and I'm going to focus on Pete because he's my namesake. But Steamboat Willie's stuff, it's all brand new art, right? Because there's just no way you're going to get those that looking any good, the originals looking any good. So they created all this brand new art, and it looks perfect. It looks exactly like what you remember Steamboat Willie looking like. But that art style is then totally different when we look at, you know, how the Little Mermaid visuals would have been, or 101 Dalmatians, or I don't know, Robin Hood, those sorts of things. They all have a similar style in that, like, it all sits together really nicely. You could put any card against any other card and it will sit together and not look strange. And yet they are very different visual styles. They somehow managed to make the whole thing kind of come together. Loads of beautiful components, loads of thick cardboard pieces. The cardstock's really good. So all of that's really good. Then the game mechanics themselves. It's like, the way I described it, and this is going to be sacrilege to some people, but the way I described it is it's the Arkham Asylum or the Netrunner that myself and Alex can easily get into and be fans of. You don't do you don't do deck building. There's no sense of I'm going to build this deck and do all that sort of stuff, because I hate deck building. There's none of that sort of stuff. But there's lots of really interesting mechanics in there that thematically feel right. And it's very compelling. You're almost telling a story as you're going through it. Not in a kind of like narrative RPG sort of a sense, but there's a I do this, like, oh, this is where I transformed. This is where I found the genie. This is when I did all those sorts of things. It's just amazing. And I guess the thing with it is I've come away from it thinking, first of all, I want to get all the other ones. Like, we're already eyeing up the rest of the Villainous collection. But I'm also really interested in seeing, what does the Marvel set look like? What happens there? Like, what is the difference? I know that they're not cross-compatible, but what does that offer? Are they able to get across the Marvel characters in the same way? Because my mind is now reeling into, like, how does Spider-Man play? How is that different to Star-Lord? How is that different to, just absolutely incredible work.
It was so much more complex than I was anticipating, and I think there is like a difficulty scale, so you can pick villains, I should say. You can pick villains that operate slightly easier, or the conditions for them to win are slightly less complex to get to grips with, because obviously you look at this on the shelf, and as you said, like, I've seen this game everywhere, and its ubiquity in some regards has been the thing that's kind of put me off in a way, which is a detriment on my part and a bad reflection on myself, just to discount something because it seems very popular. But I think where I was coming from, I felt like with this IP, with this direction, that it would be a game that wouldn't have that complexity, and it wouldn't have that detail. And the one thing that struck me when I played it is how it felt to play a lot like Jaws felt to play.
Sure.
Now, I know you bounced off Jaws, Pete, but me and Chris actually really enjoyed Jaws.
I loved the first half.
Yeah. But incidentally, Jaws and Villainous are by the same designer, Prospero Hall, who does a ton of IP board games. Like, he's done a Home Alone one, he's done a Ted Lasso one. Horrified is one of his
Rear Window, which is a new game.
Ones. Rear Window, which is getting a lot of buzz around it. Did one on Pan Am, and did Rahman Fury, which is one of the games we played actually that weekend, which I enjoyed. Again, Pete,
oh yeah,
you don't enjoy it. But again, the same with Jaws, which is another Ravensburger game, was a game that didn't seem on the surface like it should be as complex mechanically or rewarding mechanically as it actually turned out to be.
Yeah.
And Villainous gave me all the same vibes as playing a Blitz deck from Flesh and Blood, from playing a certain colour deck from Magic the Gathering. That act of, I've got this deck of cards, how do I get the best out of it?
I think, Dan, you would like this game a lot.
Yeah.
Because you're into Disney.
I do like the idea of, like, as Pete, you mentioned, but the deck building kind of not being a factor. That is attractive to me, because, as you'll be well aware, like, deck building games like just hold no interest for me whatsoever. Like it just goes straight over my head. So, and I think that element coming for me as someone who doesn't play games to the same level as perhaps you guys do, like and that's more to do with kind of just opportunity to play games. I don't have the same necessary opportunities because I don't really play them kind of all that much, or the kind of the types of games we play are very limited. So having a game like this that doesn't have that barrier of deck building, but also has that attraction of the known properties, absolutely, I can get on board, because there is a level of kind of there is a hurdle to overcome that I've already jumped over because I can be invested in a certain form, if you know what I mean. So that like often with games, there's many hurdles when you first learn a game, and like that's why it's so difficult when you try and get people who don't play games, because as people who have played board games, like, I mean, I have, like, you know that actually the first time you play a game, you're probably not going to get it, or you are going to get it, but you're not going to fully enjoy it because you're spending all the time working it all out. Once you play it through once, you know the run, and then next time you can just enjoy it. And obviously for people who don't play them, like that's like, I don't want to have to play it 3 or 4 times just to enjoy it. I want to play it one and done. So anything that you can do to enable that hurdle to be knocked down, to make it easier to engage with, always should be kind of praised and kind of looked for.
It was really interesting because, like, I was sat playing with Alex. Alex was sat next to me, and Alex was playing a much more complex character. They were playing as is it Esme from Emperor's New Groove?
Yeah.
It was so funny because I watched. I was like, what's Alex doing? Alex was dealing out 4 piles of cards face down, and one of her goals was to look for Kronk. And like in any other skin, I wouldn't have got that straight away. She goes, "Oh yeah, because of that bit in the film." And it was really lovely because we sometimes would be pausing the game, going, "Oh gosh, yeah, I haven't watched that film in ages. Oh, it's so funny when this happens. With the exception of Steamboat Willie, which I think I've watched once maybe in my life, like. The other 3 of us around the table going, "Oh gosh, yeah, you've got Big Ben on your thing, Sam. Yeah, that was like the first instance of CGI in a Disney film, a Disney animated film." And so we were talking as much about our nostalgia for Disney as we were talking about, "Oh, what are you doing? Why are you doing this?" Which I thought was really, really lovely.
And the thing that I think like really gets it across is obviously as Sam points out, it's very thematic in that way. But I think the coolest thing about it being an asymmetrical game is that, unlike something like Root, which obviously I really like, but unlike something like that, this one's actually much easier to learn and to teach, because even if you've not played the character before, or if you're not playing the character at that time, the fundamental mechanics are all the same across all the characters. You can discard down, you can do an action, you can whatever it is, you can respond to a specific condition, for example. They're all fundamentally the same. It's just that when you're actually looking at the character you're going to play, those objectives and those goals, those are different. There are little twists on what those rules are. And so it's much, much easier to get across what it is to somebody who's just brand new. And what it also does is it makes you want all the other ones, because you know that you're not going to have to sit down and learn. Okay, how does the Eyrie work again? How do the woodland creatures work again? It's been 3 months since I've played it, and I've completely forgotten how to play this thing. Right? The thing with Villainous is that you just immediately pick it up. You immediately want to move on, but you also really want to go and see, oh, I really like that character. I wonder how they've done this in this game. And it's just very, very compelling.
Yeah. The Marvel thing would be interesting, considering that most Marvel villains are pretty non-memorable.
Right.
Yeah. Consequently, it wasn't the only asynchronous game that we played that weekend, which is interesting because asynchronous games, as well as games that do player elimination, are pretty much, those are my no-go zones in terms of games that I enjoy playing.
Asymmetrical games.
Asymmetrical games. I mean, saying that now, I've just twigged that Cosmic Encounter is an asymmetric game in a way.
It is.
But again, the fundamentals of something like Cosmic Encounter.
Yeah. They're exactly
They're
the same
all
for
the
everyone,
fundamentals are all the same. It's just here's
Yeah.
the twist. I suppose you're going to get different levels of that, little different shades of grey within asymmetrical games, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to get things that are like, well, there's very little that's the same, but you're still using maybe the same tokens and counters and more, maybe, as you say, phases. And then there's ones that are identical, except for, tiny little things here and there.
So where would Crescent Moon sit for everyone else? Because this is the other game that we played that was kindly sent to us from Osprey Games, and they sent it to us an age ago. And I do apologise to the wonderful people at Osprey, because usually we'd be chomping at the bit to get some latest Osprey beans down our throat. But
yeah, all right.
Alas,
Osprey
this time
beans.
it's taken us a while, because Crescent Moon is a weird proposition where the minimum player count is 4 and the maximum player count is 5, and that's it. And that's quite strange in this current age of board games where we're sitting, where games are trying to appeal to a really broad section of people and players. Solitaire mode and 2-player modes get slotted onto loads of games that don't need it, deserve it, or even works with it. Whereas here it's making a very, very bold claim that this is only for 4 and 5 people, and that's it. So it's very, very rare these days that I get 4 people round the table, and if I do, sitting down for a area control asymmetrical game can be a pretty hard sell. So I took the opportunity of me, Pete, Kris and Alex, sorry Dan, being together to play Crescent Moon for the first time. And yes, so this is another asynchronous game. By that we mean that all the players around the table are doing different things in the same game, or they may have different ways that they are going to win. There is some difference between how each of those players will be playing and interacting with the game. So this is from Stephen Mathers with art by Navid Rahman. And, we unboxed this all together around the table. And the art is incredible. Like, Osprey are well known for how stunning their games look. And Crescent Moon doesn't disappoint. Like, it's set in like a period of time which really allows it to celebrate a lot of Middle Eastern like artistry and iconography, and it looks stunning for embracing that sort of art and culture from that part of the world, specifically at that time. And on the face of it is a area control game where players are essentially fighting or attempting to use influence to gain control over a very, very small map, which is sort of the second thing after the artwork that really struck me, like how small this map we were all fighting over was. It really helps make all the 4 players around the table focus in on one particular thing. So unlike something like Scythe, where you're kind of focused in on your particular region, you can kind of get very blinkered into turtling away in one particular corner of the board, or something like Villainous, where you're very much looking down at your player board and not really engaging with the other players around the table. Everyone, despite it being an asynchronous game, is very much focused on this small area in the center of the table that you're all kind of fighting for over dominance. And the next sort of trick that I think Crescent Moon plays, and plays it really well, is on how well defined it puts across its characters. Now, my thing with Root is, and there's been a lot of like comparison by, is Crescent Moon the new Root, and is this the Root beta, and blah, 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 blah. not really party to that conversation, and I'm only going to bring up root in this one instance, is that my issue with root has always been never really clearly being able to understand how other people play around the board and how I should interact with them and what they are going for. Like I've enjoyed the games of root that I've played, but I've always struggled with very quickly being able to understand, this is that character, that's what they're doing, fine. However, Crescent Moon streamlines that experience remarkably. So we played as a merchant, the warlord, the sultan, and the caliph. If you have a fifth player, that fifth player becomes the nomad. And the roles, and I think this is why it's a 4-player minimum game, it's the roles are perfectly suited to complement each other and to bounce off each other, to the degree where there are certain players who benefit from siding with other players around the board, and there are certain players that will benefit from purposefully attacking or going after certain other players around the board. So it makes very, very clear demarcation in terms of, I am the warlord, I'm all about attacking, and I'm the sultan, and I'm building and I'm rejuvenating this land and establishing lots of towns and cities everywhere, and I'm the caliph, and I'm all about trying to protect these buildings that the sultan is making. And then the nomad is basically, I really wish we'd had a fifth player because I really like how the nomad plays. And the nomad is basically someone who hires out mercenaries to other players around the board. Yeah. And they effectively have a win condition where it's all about, they turn the money that they make from selling mercenaries into victory points. And I think the key to what I enjoyed most about Crescent Moon is finishing it and immediately feeling like, oh, I want to play as what Kris was doing, because that looked really fun.
It was the best player. I think mine was the best role personally.
The Merchant was great because it really allowed for those elements of diplomacy. Like there's a particular mechanic that you had, Kris, as the Merchant, where is it during battles or during influence contests? One of the two. When two players were in contention with each other, they could give away victory points to Kris in order to get his help in those contests. And that was probably the moment where I really felt, that wonderful element of role playing coming into a game like that.
And Pete, you were the warmonger, but you took about quite a bit of time to, get into the whole war aspect.
The war element. But it also, I was heading out, having little scraps here and there. I think one of the things I really liked about it as well was that when I played the map that we were playing on, I thought, okay, there's a couple of ways I can deal with this, but generally there's going to be a few strategies that I'm going to use each time that I use this. But one of the things I really liked about it is there's different maps. You can take the whole thing and just move it up.
I love that.
Move it up.
It reminded me a lot of like Spirit Island.
Yeah.
Yes.
In that regard, how small and how tight the board is.
Yeah, and like how, even though I think it took us about an hour and a half to play, but I do like as well how small and tight the actual game progression is.
Yeah.
So you play over the course of 3 years, 4 years, if you go for like the full game, quote unquote. And in each year you only take 4 actions. So we only had 12 actions to basically try and win the game. And I kind of felt half and half about it. Part of me really likes the simplicity of it and the fact it really cuts to the chase. And I think that there's quite a few occasions where you really feel like you've got to go in one certain direction and you've really got to play to the strengths of your character, because if you don't, you're not going to get the most out of those 12 actions. And what's really nice is the game actually comes with little booklets for each character, and it has like advice from an old friend or something like that, which gives you like this wonderful, like very thematic letter that you've been sent, which explains who you are, what you're going out for, and how you should play, or sort of like how you should like direct your resources.
But what I like about that, Dan, is the fact that like if you wanted to, you could take that advice, and I did. So straight away I became very pally with the Sultan, which Alex played at. But if you want to ignore that, if you're a seasoned player and think, actually no, I've cultivated my own strategy. I'm going to play my Murshid as someone who's a little bit more fighty. I could go and do that if I wanted to. So it's not like, okay, I have to play in this particular way, and every time I play the Murshid, it's always going to be the same steps, but on a different type of map, say, for example. I can actually choose to kind of go my own route through it. I will probably stumble quite a lot more.
Yeah.
But it's nice knowing that I could do that. So you kind of get the best of both worlds there, which I think is great.
So there's kind of flexibility, not only in kind of your interactions with the people, because obviously, like, if you look at like Cosmic Encounter, like, you might be the same person, but that's going to change depending on who you're playing with. So on top of that kind of thing, with this game, you've also got flexibility within the character itself to go in different directions. So that's an interesting way of...
You have to a certain degree, but in certain ways you don't. So, for example, the Warlord, who Pete was playing as, he has a ton of counters that represent, fighting units. Chris's character didn't. Like,
I had
didn't
influence.
have as many tokens. You had influence, which is kind of the game's way of telling you, you've got this many tokens that do this, and not very many of these tokens. So you really shouldn't be doing the thing that you haven't got enough resources to do. And also, everyone around the table has different ways they score points. As I explained with the Nomad, everyone has different benefits from doing different things. Will get them a different. I said different too many times, but different levels of victory points at the end. On the first year, you have a thing called the first year objective, which is another way that the game really tries to get you into who these characters are and a sort of a way of playing them that is going to get the best out of what they actually have to offer you. I think there is a degree of flexibility, but the game, I think, really wants you to play and explore these characters in a very specific way, which, considering the short sort of game length, as in terms of only 12 steps, I felt was actually really beneficial and a smart move.
I'm really keen to play this again. I think partly what Pete was saying, I'm a sucker for multiple map configurations. I love that. I genuinely love that. I love how tight it is. I like the fact that you don't have to have an extending table to play this on. I like the fact that one player in the room, the Sultan, is actually in control of the marketplace. And I found myself leaning into that role as the Murshid of haggling with Alex and saying, look, tell you what, if you give me a good deal on that card, I promise you I will use this card to help you if somebody attacks you in the future. And just wheeling and dealing around the table, as is the nature of my character, I really, really love that. And I think maybe actually it's quite a good thing that the minimum player count is 4. I wouldn't want to play this game regularly. Yeah, it's one of those nice things. A bit like Root. To be honest, I don't play Root weekly. The tragedy of Root to some degree is to play Root well, you have to play it regularly. The issue is I'm not ever in a position where I can play Root regularly. And whereas, because we've got this kind of streamlined game to some degree, and when I say streamlined, as you said, Sam, I'm not to say simplified. I'm actually saying there's an elegance to it. You can quickly pick it up, go cool. I'm in. I like the fact that it's sat there, and once in a Crescent Moon, I can kind of sit down and play it.
I would like to say a huge thank you to Dennis KL, who left us a lovely review on Apple Podcasts, the Great Britain version. Yes, thank you very much. 5 stars. Title of it, Just a Lovely Podcast. I won't read the rest just because it makes me feel all embarrassed and stuff to read it. So thank you very much, Dennis. That is very, very kind of you. I'm blushing. It's not just the heat. You too, listeners, you can leave a lovely review. I think you can do that so you can do it on Apple Podcasts. That's cool. You can do it on, I don't know. I imagine there's other places you can do it as well, but
probably.
But we really, really love those. But we really love those. Shut up, Peter.
No, we do really love those. Like it does make us smile and smirk and have a little giggle.
We really do love those. And the other thing you can do if you're going to take some time out of your day anyway, tell a friend. Say hello.
Tell a friend.
I listen to these 4 Burks every 2 weeks talking about the things they like, and you too could do that.
Sometimes I talk about the things that I don't like.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Well, no, sometimes Sam and Kris talk about the things they like, and I say why I don't like them.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah,
that also happens.
Yeah.
It's a balancing act.
It's a balancing act. So, that we would love that as well.
Kris spent too much of his own time creating Spotify playlists based on tea that everyone should listen to. There's details in the show notes.
Good.
If you want to listen to those things, please look at our Instagram feeds and Twitter feeds. We put a lot of effort into them, and they're really pretty and have little videos up there and little trailers from some of the shows that you might have missed as well, which are easy ways to kind of share with friends. Just sharing those videos and those little 1 minute trailers are brilliant ways of kind of helping other people see what you love so much about the show. But I think that's about it. Is it?
Yep.
That's it.
Let's go and have a nice lolly or something.
Yeah, I'm gonna go and have. I'm gonna go
before bed.
I'm gonna go and have a Solero
before bed.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I always have a nice lolly before bed.
There's something about that creamy, fatty mixture of cooling milk that really sends me off.
Creamy, fatty mixture.
To the land of Nod.
God, don't work for walls.
Well, that's what
honestly.
ice cream is.
Oof.
Goodbye, everyone, on that note.